we have Curt to join us to break this all down. I know we had you scheduled, and as the hours got closer and closer to the show, there just became more and more things that we had to cover. Of course, the, I think, latest or biggest news that we have since this morning's show. So we've got a new aid package. Speaker Johnson is really doubling down on it. It's, of course, has caused a bit of a rift in the conference. If you want to sort of walk us through just the asinine nature of this new $100 billion, like I said in the beginning, for Ukraine, Israel, and the Indo-Pacific. That's how they're couching it.
Look, at core, this is the most important function of the federal government. This is something that the U.S. government can do. As a military, it can wield it or it can choose not to wield it. And there's, from my perspective as editor of a conservative magazine, our position has been it's just really no point in having a conservative Speaker of the House if you're going to pass out this massive aid package for a war that is lost in Eurasia, a war that is clearly being won in the Middle East, and for a potential coalition partner in the Indo-Pacific that is not meeting its military obligations. This makes no sense. It's very clear that the American people should have a referendum on this subject in the November elections, and Speaker Johnson should call Congress closed for business on the matter.
I'm curious. I think you probably saw, and I'm sure the War Room posse has their heads, their pants, everything on fire over the nerve of Mike McCall. I would say the swamp epitomized someone who, what was it, peddled the Russia collusion hoax, but sure, lecture us on foreign interference. He went after Senator J.D. Vance for daring to criticize the Repo Act, basically saying that we shouldn't tie President Trump's hands over what he can do in Ukraine and more broadly Europe by pushing deals that basically do just that, right? That sort of neuter and nullify his power as the president. Of course, the policies, as you were saying, the ideologies behind them, they don't work. This is a war that they're never going to win. We're just sending Ukrainian men who, what is it, average age like 45 to die in Russian fire. But what are your thoughts on the voices like Mike McCall, who are just like a beating drum, will not let it go, will not stop with this incessant Ukraine? Is it defense contracting? Is it the lobbyists? What is the issue that is propelling these people to not give up on the Ukraine fight?
I think the critical, without going into the motivations particularly, I think the critical element here is essentially attention. I understand that the presidential race and even some of these big Senate races get all the attention, and this is something that I would urge your viewers, the War Room posse, to take a little bit more of a look at. Beneath the speakership, beneath the presidency, beneath the marquee Senate races, there are all these committee chairmen that you've never heard of. And I would challenge most people in the country have not heard of Mr. McCall, but this is one of the most influential people in the country as chairman of this committee. And the reality is, until there is a grander, more fights like this, a grander question, a grander narrative about why people like this can't wield authority, you're going to see a default to the type of thinking that has triumphed in this city since 2003 at minimum, if not longer. And it has only ruination and a appreciation of American power, a depreciation of American power to show for it.
And can you sort of extrapolate this on the Israeli front and even the Indo-Pacific front? Of course, they put this in, and I believe they also concurrently introduced a border security measure. But just how they're sort of playing games with these priorities, kind of, I always call it red meat for the base, but trying to string us along with these little shiny toys, as Steve always says. But walk us through the Israel side of this package as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Israel thing's very confusing, and I think even among the ranks of conservatives, there's disagreements. Conservatives skeptical of foreign wars are divided on the Israel quotient to it. From my perspective, I think it's pretty simple. Why do we need a military aid package for a war that's not going to change out in Eastern Europe? And why do we need a military aid package for a war that the Israelis are already winning? The controversy over the war in the Middle East is not whether or not Israel is going to deal with Hamas. It's whether or not that they're dealing with them too brutally. And so at the same time that that's the question, our solution is to throw them military technology they don't need. I mean, actually, the Ukrainians do need it. It's just that our perpetuation of the war is going to be net bad for the Ukrainian people and for humanity, quite frankly. And on Taiwan, since you asked specifically, if Taiwan is not willing to meet its own defense needs, it's not clear why the U.S. should throw an expenditure this way that is merely provocative to the Chinese and invites this invasion sooner. If the Taiwanese meet their defense needs, I think we can have a conversation then.
Well, sorry, I was having some audio difficulties, but when you say, you know, you don't want to necessarily get into what is the driving factors behind a lot of these politicians. I mean, I think the War Room Posse is fairly familiar with people like Mike McCaul. I know Steve is always lighting them up. But I'm just curious in the sense that, you know, whether it's Israel, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's, you know, insert the country, the ability to put America first is just lost on members of Congress. And of course, you have the rank and file members. You have a few people, right, like the Matt Gaetzes of the world, who are willing to actually do that. They've said they will challenge and primary those who vote for additional Ukraine spending. But you run American Conservative. I'm just curious, could you drill down a little bit on what you think are sort of the motivating factors behind why these people just refuse to put America first? I know that's sort of a cliche, dumbed down way of saying it, but what creates Mike McCaul? Is he a feature of the system? Is he a bug of the system? Why are there so many people like him? And why does it seem so hard to find actual America First conservatives who are willing to fight for the issues and do the things they were actually elected to do?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to comment on the structural things. I didn't mean to dodge your question, Natalie. I just think the reality.
No, you're good.
Take someone more famous, Mr. Johnson. The reality is, if he dies, if he falls on his sword, so to speak here, if his speakership dies, and he will have done it on the Ukraine issue, the likelihood of corporate board seats in Fortune 500 companies and defense contractors that ring Northern Virginia, offering him slots, i.e. the Nikki Haley option, is just way higher. So yes, I think there have to be remunerative considerations. Now, I'm not arguing that money is exchanging hands now, but there's no effective legislation or controls on people making policy decisions based on things in the future. And I don't really know what the check on it would be. You could create a 5-year lobbying ban, a 1-year lobbying ban, a 10-year lobbying ban. I think you always find loopholes here, and that's why it's important for in a democracy for people to hold the leaders to account. That's the swiftest failsafe. In terms of foreign theaters and certain members, frankly, lust to get involved in them, I do think there's something almost psychological going on, where they get to have these sort of nationalist impulses for a foreign country, where they're afraid to show that impulse here at home, which is a shame, considering, I mean, the country is actually suffering what could be termed an invasion on the southern border.
So in your estimation, obviously you follow this stuff quite closely. The American Conservative is always ahead of the curve. How do you think this is going to shake out, particularly on the Speaker Johnson front? Do you think we're going to see the motion to vacate? We know Tom Emmer's already sort of potentially putting his hat in the ring. Just again, hypothetically, how do you think it'll shake out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how this passes and Speaker Johnson survives without at least a few Democratic votes. And if he takes Democratic votes, then the speakership will be terminal after the election. I think it would be a sad statement on a sad coda, frankly, on his career as a conservative and Republican lawmaker and activist to accept Democratic support to maintain his speakership. So it's possible he resigns. I mean, it does feel like everyone's sort of fatigued and wants to have this election, and so potentially his chances of survival are higher than McCarthy's were in autumn. But I don't think they're certain by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think, I mean, there are 220 odd Republican lawmakers there, and the speakership itself is famously not closed to almost any American. I mean, we can't find somebody who can keep this conference together. It would be quite pathetic.
And Curt, we've got to let you go, but if people want to follow you and get American Conservative, where can they go to do all that and support the magazine?
Sure. www.theamericanconservative.com. You can read my tweets at Curt Mills, CurtMills. We have a new issue out all about Ohio, some of the names, Vivek Ramaswamy, J.D. Vance, people at the leading edge of opposing this stuff. So please give us your consideration.
You guys do great work. Curt, thank you so much for joining us.